Welcome to Mountain View Church. We are home for the wanderer and rest for the weary. And you're listening to this Sunday sermon.
We kicked off a series last week called Made for More. And go back, you can see it on YouTube. Gina was talking about how we are made for more. And it was kind of a provocative statement, but a good one, a provocative statement saying, we are made for more than just our salvation. And we love our salvation. We celebrate salvations just like we celebrate birthdays. But birthdays are not the end of the story. Birthdays are the beginning of the story. And so for those of us that are Jesus followers, those of us that are Christians, we get to do even more than celebrate the day of our salvation, even more than celebrate the day of our birth. The worship set was just so great, and I'm over there bawling because when we were doing that song, Blessed Assurance, this is my story, this is my song, I asked them in the 11th hour if they could include that song, and man, it took me right back to my granddaddy's church. Right back, and Mom and Dad, if you're watching, Blessed Assurance, Jesus is mine. Oh, what a foretaste of glory divine. This is my story. This is my song. So we're here today to talk about you were made for more. And you were made for more great stories, not just your salvation story, but eternal stories. So we're going to look at a parable from Jesus. We're going to take that apart. We're going to look at a little bit of what Peter wrote to one of his churches, and then we're going to come back and bring it all home and look at Jesus again. So first thing I want to give you is the story of the Bible. And now this is a model, right? That's my job as a teacher, as a professor, is to provide models. Models are not the actual thing. Models are just representations of things. So let's look at a model of the Bible, a timeline that begins with eternity past. And if you've seen the recent images from the new telescope that NASA has, we have a greater appreciation of eternity past. And a timeline that goes to eternity future. Those are arrows that go, 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 go. There is no end. And it begins with Genesis 1. And if you know your Bible at all, Genesis 1 starts with a garden. There's this scene where the world is perfect. It's beautiful. It's a garden. Everything is good. And man was made to reflect God's image and work in the garden and be productive. And then if we skip all the way forward to the last chapter in the Bible, Revelation chapter 22, we get the garden again, a new Jerusalem, and we have the garden and the rivers flowing and the tree of life, and everything's made new again. And that's one of our core values here, is celebrating the restoration of all things, where God comes in and through his hand, he restores us to what we were meant to be and what the world is meant to be. But we're in this messy middle. We're in this place here where after the fall, a theological term, after the fall, the world got broken. And we know the world is broken. The world's messed up. It's not right. And at some point in the future, there will be a new heaven and new earth. And so we have these two milestones. And here we are in the messy middle. Here's the model of the whole story of the Bible. But what's interesting for us as human beings, we often kind of forget and we stick ourselves in the messy middle. And we think about history. And we want our story to be a part of history. I think it's in all of us. We want to make a difference. We want to have an impact. We want to be a part of the story. We would love to make history. But the problem with history, as we define it here, is defined to this world. I'm here to advocate that if we are Jesus followers, we need to think less about history and more about his story, which goes way beyond what's happening in this world. And what I'm going to put forward to you today is you have the opportunity today to make eternal stories. And you have the opportunity today to bring the eternity into now. It's mind-blowing, it's mind-bending, and let's get into it. Now, the first paradigm shift, we need to think beyond today. We need to think beyond this world. We need to think of the new world. But there was also a book, many of you may have read it because 36 million people have read it, called Purpose-Driven Life. It says 35 million here. I'm sure it's up to 36 now. Rick Warren, pastor just up the road here, wrote this book 20 years ago. And if you've read it, you probably remember the very first sentence. A huge paradigm shift. And the sentence is this: it's not about you. It's not about you. Well, then what's it about? I mean, I want to tell a great story. I want to be a part of a great story. And this is what's so great, is God, who is the author and perfecter of our faith, allows us to co-author the story. We get to be co-authors in the greatest story ever. It's mind-blowing. And so what I want to do is ask this question: how do we get to co-author great eternal stories? I mean, if you Google right now, if you go out to Amazon and you look for books on how to write a great story, you'll find thousands of books on how to write a great story. But I want to look at what Jesus said about how we can write great eternal stories. Jesus spoke as recorded in our Gospels. There may have been more, but he recorded at least 34 up to 38 different parables. Parables are stories. Jesus told stories to get points across. Half of those were about money, but we're not going to be talking about that today. And everybody said amen. So what we're going to be talking about is this kind of unusual parable. Man, I spent a lot of time on this week. And this may be one of those parables that you've read before. Maybe you just kind of skip over going, I don't quite understand it. I don't quite get it. So we're really going to get into it, into the provocative idea that we get to co-author great eternal stories. So I'm going to go to Luke chapter 6, starting at verse 1. If you want to read along, I'm going to have it right up here with us. Luke chapter 6, verse 1. Jesus told his disciples, there was a rich man whose manager was accused of wasting his possessions. So here we got a really rich guy. He's so rich, he needs somebody to manage his stuff. Okay, he's a manager. Two characters in this parable: rich man, manager, managing stuff. He was accused of wasting his stuff, his possessions. So the rich man called him in and he asked him, what is this I hear about you? Give an account of your management, because you cannot be my manager any longer. So I imagine Jesus is telling his story. The disciples are around. There's probably other people around, and they're all listening, and they're figuring out who's who in the story. And okay, we know there's this evil manager, he's accused, and so he's probably going to get it, and you got this idea of you're going to have to give an account. You can't be my manager any longer. Time is up. It's like he's given him his 2 weeks notice. And you're about to be done. You're about to be fired. Now, the manager, think about it. He's living on the wealth of the owner. And so all of a sudden in 2 weeks, he's got no income. He's got no job. What's he going to do? How will he provide for himself? I'm so glad you asked. So everybody leans in. And the manager said to himself, the evil manager, this is what I shall do. What shall I do now? My master is taking away my job. I'm not strong enough to dig. I'm ashamed to beg. I'm too proud. I know what I'll do so that when I lose my job here, people will welcome me into their houses. He's thinking it through. He's being kind of smart. Look, I'm going to lose my job. I just got my notice. What am I going to do the day after that? I'm losing my income. I don't feel like digging. That's not, my training. That's not my vocation. And I don't feel like begging because I'm way too proud to go begging. What can I do? I know. I got a plan. Here's what I can do to secure myself in this future that I know is coming. I've got a limited amount of time and a little bit amount of resources. Only for 2 weeks do I get my master's resources at my disposal. And so he called in each one of his master's debtors. These are people that owe stuff to the rich master. And he says to the first, how much do you owe my master? 900 gallons of olive oil. I don't have a lot of olive oil around my house, but that seems like a lot. 900 gallons. It's a measure of wealth. It's a lot. He owes a lot to the master. And then the wicked servant says, the manager take your bill, your 900, sit down quickly and make it 450. Cut it in half. Cut your debt to the master in half. I can do that for you. Tell you what, here's what I'm going to do. You owe 900? Let's just make it 450. Hurry up. Now, what do you think the guy who owes the 900 is going to do? 450? Really? That's a pretty sweet deal. Thank you. You just cut my debt in half. I'm so happy. And then he said, I bet, hey, if there's anything I can ever do for you, you just let me know. Yeah, maybe, but don't worry about it. I cut your debt in half, and yeah, maybe you'll hear from me in the not too distant future. And then the second guy comes in, and he asks the second, how much do you owe? 1,000 bushels of wheat. Again, a big measure, a lot. He owes a bunch. And he replied, take your bill and make it 800, 20% discount. Really? You're going to give me 20% off? 20% off right now. Well, thanks, man. I appreciate it. If there's anything I can ever do for you, not at the moment, but maybe, thank you so much, I'll get back to you. You see what he's doing? He's securing his future. Now, I imagine the people listening to Jesus tell this story at this moment are all like, this guy's a thief. This guy, he's going to get it. I know how these parables work. Every time Jesus tells a story, it all comes out okay at the end. God's going to, there's going to be justice. Now imagine the surprise when Jesus tells the story as follows. Then he says, the master commended this dishonest manager because he acted shrewdly. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, self-control, shrewdness. Right? It seems awkward. He's commending him for being shrewd. Shrewd feels like thievery. In fact, this guy's a thief, but the guy's commending him for, why isn't he condemning him rather than commending him? I don't understand, and you may not understand, and frankly, I've read this for years. It just felt a little strange. He commended him for acting shrewdly. Well, let's keep going. For the people of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their own kind than are the people of the light. Here's what Jesus is getting to. There's two types of people in the world. Those who think, this world, I live, I die, let's eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. People of this world. And then there's the people of light. Most of us in this room are the people of the light. The people of the light are the ones who say, it's not just this world, it's the eternal world. It's the hereafter. And Jesus is saying through the master that the people of this world know they have limited time and they have limited resources and they have limited opportunity, and they act smart because they think it through and they plan for their future such as they know it. And they're a lot smarter than a lot of the people of the light who should be thinking, yes, I have limited time, I have limited resources, but I'm not worried about here and death. I want to worry about here and new world, restoration of all things. It's a totally distant future. And Jesus is calling out the people of light through this story. He says they are more shrewd in dealing with their own kind than the people of the light. If I bring up our model again, the people of this world are only thinking so far, and they're maximizing, they're self-actualizing, they're doing all they can to make the most of this world. The people of the light need to be doing the same thing, realizing we have limited time, limited resources, but maximizing our potential, our stories into eternity. Okay, people of light, what should we be doing next? Jesus then shifts from storytelling to disciple telling, to you telling. And he says, I tell you, that's us. I tell you, use worldly wealth to gain friends for yourselves so that when it is gone, because it's temporary, worldly wealth is temporary, you will be welcomed into eternal dwellings. Now, this is the part that it was weird enough before that the master commended the evil guy. And he did say he was evil, so we know there will be justice, but he commended him for his actions. And now Jesus comes along and he's saying, I can buy friends? I don't think Jesus is saying that. He's not saying you can there's no stairway to heaven. You can't grease Peter's palms at the pearly gates. You can't buy your way in. What's he saying about buy yourself friends so that you can be welcomed into eternal dwellings? Here's what I think he's saying. Here's the principle I want us to get. He's saying we can use our worldly wealth today and have an eternal impact. We can use our worldly wealth today to make an eternal story. Because we know what we have today is limited, and we know that it's not ours. We are stewards. So here's what I want to bring back. Peter. What does he mean by stewardship? Use your worldly wealth today, because when it is gone, you will have friends in eternity welcoming you. Peter adds to this stewardship idea when he says, each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms. And a bunch of you right now are sitting there going, I thought you said we weren't going to be talking about tithing. I'm not talking about tithing. I'm talking about everything. This is way bigger than some percentage. This is stewardship of all the gifts you've received in its various forms. We are stewards. We're like that manager. It's not our stuff. We're managing the gifts that we've been given. We are stewards of God's grace in its various forms, not just your money. Gifts in its various forms. So let's parse this out a little bit. Stewards of God's grace. What does that mean? Steward means you're a manager. You're not an owner. Steward means it's temporary. And steward means, like if we go back to the parable, you're accountable. You're going to have to give an account of what you did with the gifts you've been given to manage. See, that totally changes the perspective. I'm no longer an owner acquiring stuff. I'm now a person giving gifts or investing in stuff that I can then use for the kingdom. Well, what kind of stuff? It said various forms. God's gifts in its various forms. Well, yeah, there's time, there's talent, and there's treasure. And we've all got some. Oh, but I've got small kids at home and my time is very limited. Yeah, maybe right now you've got just a little bit of time, but you've got some time. Well, I'm retired now and I'm really busy surfing and golfing. You've got time. You've got some time. You've got some talent. Do you know how to do Excel? There are kids that don't. Do you know how to create 32-page PowerPoints like me? There are people who don't. You've got some talent. You can share your talent. Can you bake? You can share your talent. Can you quilt? You can share your talent. Do you have a loving golden retriever that greets everybody, whether they're homeless or kids seeking escape from their parents? You've got a talented dog. Use her. Use her. And then you've got treasure. You've got treasure. Not just money, but you've got things. You got a boat? Use it. You got a cell phone? Use it. Call somebody. Text them. Encourage them. You've got time. You've got talent. You've got treasure. You are a steward of these gifts, and you can use these things to make an eternal difference. So what does it mean when Jesus says, get yourself some friends and you will be welcomed into heaven? Here's what I think it means. Because all shall be made known. I think what it means is when we get to the new eternity, when all is made right and all is revealed, there's going to be a whole lot of great stories. Hey, Jody, I'm glad you're here. You don't remember me, but I was that kid in youth group. Yeah, Jason, the one that, flipped you off and then left, and then you didn't yell at me or you didn't call my parents. Yeah, I just want you to know I never came back to your youth group, but I did go to another youth group. So thank you and I had this wonderful Christian life. Hey, Sally, I'm so glad you're here. Sally, remember that time you opened your home and you allowed us all to come in and we had that Bible study and I asked all those obnoxious questions and you were so patient and loving to me. I just want you to know it worked out. I'm here. We're here. And you were just so great. You wouldn't believe how gracious Sally was. I was so obnoxious. It'll be stories like that. It'll be stories like, hey, Fred, remember you invested in that building, that new church? I just want you to know how many kids came to know Jesus in Sunday school in that building. Your investment, it paid off. Hey, remember that time I was really down and out and you may not even recall it. You called me you sent the text and then I replied and you called me because nobody calls anymore and you asked, how you doing? You saved my life that day. Because I was thinking that maybe it just wasn't worth it anymore. The things we do with our time, talent, and treasure today will have an eternal impact. And they're going to be stories, great stories, eternal stories that make a difference. History will long be forgotten, but his story goes on forever. So how does this work? How does Jesus do this? How can we turn our stuff into stories? One more story I want to share. This one's recorded in all four Gospels. All four Gospels, there's this story. Jesus feeding the 5,000. And Jesus, when he feeds the 5,000, you may remember, and it happens 2 chapters later also, he feeds 4,000. 5,000 people around. It's 5,000 men, but so that there's probably 15,000 people by the time you had everybody else, the kids and the wives. 15,000 people, and they're all hungry, and the disciples come to Jesus, and they said, hey, these people have been out here for a while. They have a logistics problem. And they say, Jesus, I need you, if you just disperse the crowd, tell them all to go get some food, otherwise they're going to get really, really hungry. And Jesus goes, you feed them. What? There's like no Ralph's, there's no Giant, there's no 7-Eleven, there's no, how are we going to do that? You feed them. And in all four Gospels, in all four accounts of the story, Jesus asks the same thing. He tells them to take inventory. He says, how many loaves do you have? Go and see. He tells them to take inventory. What do you got? Andrew comes back and he's got a little boy. He says, well, we got a few loaves and we got a few fish. That's all we got. And Jesus turns to the disciples and he says, distribute among them. Can you imagine being one of the 12 disciples and you're like, 15,000 people. Okay, Jesus. I mean, they must have felt foolish, taking what little they had. And then you know the way the story goes. They start handing it out. And at the end, there was 12 basketfuls left over. Because they took inventory and they brought what they thought was a little bit and they allowed Jesus to multiply it. It's interesting, 2 chapters later, when Jesus goes to feed 4,000 people, same thing, except this time, instead of the disciples bringing Jesus the logistics problem, Jesus says, hey, disciples, all these people here, they've been with me 3 days. You think they're going to get hungry? And the disciples answer, they say, well, there's no food around here. And I almost think the disciples are kind of smiling and grinning, and they're going, so, Jesus, what shall we do? And Jesus says, what do you got? And the very next sentence, we've got 7 fish. They knew their inventory. They knew exactly what they had, and they got to watch the miracle happen again. They got to bring eternity into today by sharing the resources they had, simply by taking inventory. Folks, salvation is awesome. I am so excited to be saved. I really am, because I like the eternity. Eternity is set into the hearts of man. We know this. We get frustrated with what's happening today, and we want to make a difference today. And making a difference today is good, and it's important. But even greater than that, we can make a difference. Strength for today and bright hope for tomorrow, blessings all mine. 10,000 beside. Because God is faithful to take what little we offer back to him as managers of his stuff and multiply it and make an eternal difference. You were made for more stories. You were made for great stories. You were made not just to make history, but to be a part of his story. You get to co-author. You get to co-author the greatest story ever written. All you need to do to start is take inventory. I'm going to invite the band back up, and we're going to move into a time of so what, now what? All right, Jody, cute stories. Thanks for sharing those, and the delivery was adequate, but we appreciate the effort. I want you to move past that into personal. So what, now what? What do I do with this? First, I'd say recognize our time here and the resources we have is temporary. It's limited. But the impact of the way we use those resources and our time can be eternal and make a huge, huge, immeasurable difference. So I'd ask you to think through this. I've written this steward's prayer. Lord, what do you want me to do today with all you've trusted me to honor you and to advance your kingdom? Lord, what can I do today with the stuff you've given me? I'm going to take inventory. And what can I do with that stuff to advance your kingdom? Because you see, when Jesus came, he announced that the kingdom was at hand. And when we pray, our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, we get to pull forward past that big milestone of the new heaven and the new earth and the new Jerusalem and all that's in Revelation. We get to pull the kingdom forward into today. Pray with me, please. Father God, a message like this is meant to be encouraging. Father, encourage us to see the opportunities available to us with your stuff. Thank you for trusting us with your stuff. Father, how can we invest the stuff we're managing for your kingdom? How can we use our homes? How can we use our possessions that we're managing? How can we use our talents, the skills we have? How can we use our time to encourage others today in a way that stories will be told in eternity about how you took our little effort and multiplied it and multiplied it and multiplied it so there was so much left over.
Thank you so much for listening. If you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to this channel. If you would like to connect with our church or donate to financially support our ministry, visit us at nvc.life.